Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Gina.
Okay, I don't know. I'm going to say we're really at that point. So we're at 17 now. I'm going to speak slowly maybe to
Okay,
just
sounds good.
get
So that
everybody else in here. But good morning, everyone. Those who don't know me, I'm a senior instructional designer at University Online Education Services, and I'm really happy to introduce Christine Chappé. And I think you're going to really enjoy this session. I had a sneak peek, so I'm going to give you that. This is a great one. You picked a good one to come join us to attend, and I don't know, take it away.
great. Thank you so much, Karen. I appreciate you. And while we're setting up and starting, I'll introduce myself. But since you've had some practice, some of you have already had some practice using the GIFs. And those of you, just going to give a quick rundown on how to use it. If you press the little lightning bolt next to where you would start typing in the chat, you'll see something that says Giphy. And you select that, and then you can start typing a keyword. And after you press that keyword, you can press enter. We won't see what you have entered. We will only see when you submit, but you can press shuffle and choose the perfect GIF that aligns with the question I'm about to ask you. And then you can submit that, and then we'll see the GIF. If you don't feel comfortable using GIFs, that is perfectly okay. If you want to just type an answer instead, no big deal. But my question for you is, what is your superpower in online education? Whether you are an instructor, whether you're an instructional designer, an administrator, a student, whatever the case may be, I want to know what your superpower is in online education. Right. And like I said, you can feel free to utilize GIFs. I love a good GIF. Or if you would just prefer to type it, that's absolutely okay too. All right. So thank you so much, everybody, for being here. And while you're doing that, while you're getting acquainted with everything, um, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Christine Chappé. As Karen said, I am the director of online MSW programs at Rutgers School of Social Work. I am also an assistant professor of teaching, and I'm very happy to be here to present Creating Brave Spaces in Asynchronous Learning Environments. Now, obviously, because I'm with the School of Social Work, some of the information that I'm giving you is social work centered, but of course, this is going to be applicable to any discipline as you see fit. So far, I see donut despair. I do see that the keyword was encouragement. I love that. Encouragement and humor. Looking sharp. Very cute. So feel free to keep on sending in your superpowers, humor, awesome, energy. Wonderful. We love energy. Now, what I'm asking you, the reason why I'm asking you this particular question is because it aligns with something called a self-affirming icebreaker. And I'll go into detail with this a little bit later. But what a self-affirming icebreaker is something that encourages people's strengths, their values, and experiences. I find that with some of my courses, the student introductions tend to be centered around, like, tell us your name, tell us what your practicum learning experience is, and something like that. But I think that it's nice to kind of change it up a little bit and ask something that really encourages people to look inwardly and see what brings this wonderful part of them to the table. All right, so first off, let's define what brave spaces are. Some of you may have heard of this term before, some of you may have not. But essentially, brave spaces are environments where people feel brave enough to participate in open and honest dialogue. It acknowledges that sometimes this sharing and sometimes the things that we're learning might make us feel a little bit uncomfortable at times, but that is a normal part of growing. And so with that, students are encouraged to speak up. They're encouraged to take risks, and they're encouraged to engage in difficult conversations with courage and respect. Now, some of you may be asking, why are we doing brave spaces? What about safe spaces? We've heard of safe spaces before, right? Um, so before, I'm going to head back in a second, but this is This is what I see as the difference between safe spaces and brave spaces. Safe spaces are wonderful, but I imagine it to be like a person wrapped in bubble wrap. Like, I want to feel safe, I want to feel comfortable all the time. And unfortunately, we can't control that, right? Um, if you look at the picture on the right, we have someone who's enjoying their time on a zip line. And there's some safety components in there, right? She's got a carabiner up top. She's, strapped in so that she can be safe. But it takes a little bravery to be having this much fun. So that's what I kind of like to think about in terms of the difference between a safe space and a brave space. And we're going to hear from my friend, her name is Christine Morales, about what she would define brave spaces as. Oh, I'm not sure why it's not coming up. It was just coming up before. All right, that's okay. I'm going to quote her from this video instead, and hopefully my future videos are going to show up appropriately. But Christine says, it's this idea that everyone is accepted, but everyone can learn. Everyone recognizes that there is this shared goal, at least in our social work class, to affect change and make people's lives better. We really are our best tools. And I just think that is such a well-spoken phrase and a great quote. So just a little bit more about safe spaces and why we're kind of moving towards that brave space. Safe spaces are wonderful. It's important to feel a sense of safety in order to contribute to the conversation and in order to share, but we can't control how safe someone feels, right? We can't control every aspect of a conversation. We can't control what people say. So we are trying to help them to feel brave enough and to feel brave with that sense of uncomfort at times. Accountable spaces are also a great type of space. In addition to helping people, though, take responsibility, we also want to push them to take risks and to face uncomfortable truths. And then courageous spaces, those focus on individual vulnerability, self-reflection, and personal discomfort, but we want to focus more on group risk taking so that we can help challenge others' perspectives and biases. All right, so here's why this is something that I wanted to contribute to this space and why I think this is really important. There's a lot of positives of asynchronous education, right? It opens doors to students with different schedules, with a lot of responsibilities and needs. It offers students flexibility to access their course materials and complete assignments on their own time. And these online programs really attract a range of students from across the country, and it brings their diverse perspectives and experiences to our classrooms. Um, Unfortunately, no face-to-face interaction also might mean difficulty in creating meaningful discussions between students, and especially when it comes to discussing complex topics like social justice. So students, I've noticed, can tend to really contribute more surface level because they're afraid of digging a little bit deeper. They might be afraid of the reaction that other people get, or the opposite, where they're not afraid at all. There's that inhibition that comes with online learning, where they're just feeling free to say anything without a care of what other people think or how they might feel. So we're trying to find the balance there, right? And since students come from a wide range of backgrounds and locations, all across the US, they might also have differing levels of experience with sensitive topics. And that might lead to misunderstandings, microaggressions, and sensitive comments and discussions. So we want to figure out evidence-based strategies to help all students feel like they can engage in this learning process. And just a little bit about me as to why this is important to me. When I first started teaching asynchronously, I had a little bit of difficulty engaging my students in that meaningful way and helping them to dig deeper. So this was sort of born out of me wanting to help my students to dig deeper, get really into their learning just as they would in an in-person classroom environment. And also, as a white woman, I recognize that my privilege and my identity impacts how I approach sensitive topics in my classroom. So this is also born out of me wanting to make sure that all of my students, no matter their identity, feel comfortable in this learning environment and also feel comfortable for this transformative learning. So this is just a reflection of my commitment to creating that transformational online environment. All right, so the frameworks that are guiding these practices, I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and that is the community of inquiry model, culturally responsive pedagogy, trauma-informed pedagogy, and the liberatory consciousness framework. And I'm just going to briefly go over some of these to tell you how this sort of looks for us. So the community of inquiry model or framework, it's commonly used in online education, and it's comprised of three main parts: social presence, which is the ability of learners to project their personal characteristics into the community of inquiry, thereby presenting themselves as real people; cognitive presence, or the extent to which the participants in any particular configuration of a community of inquiry are able to construct meaning through sustained communication; and then finally, teaching presence, or the design, facilitation, and direction of cognitive and social processes for the purpose of realizing personally meaningful and educational, worthwhile learning outcome. And then Peacock and Cohen wound up expanding this framework to address belonging, which, as we know, is a very important component to online learning. And it adds trust, meaning making, and deepening understanding within this framework. So that includes engagement, the culture of learning, and support. And I think some of the main takeaways from here is that as professors, as instructors, we are real people, and we want to make sure that our students know that. It's especially important in an online learning environment where it can feel like people are just names on a screen, right? So we want to make sure that our students know that we are real human beings, that we have feelings, that we care about them, that we care about their learning. And there's a lot of ways that we can do that. All right, and next up, we've got culturally responsive pedagogy, which recognizes the importance of students' cultural backgrounds, their experiences, and identities in the teaching process. It's built on the understanding that students learn best when their lived experiences are acknowledged and validated. And some reflective questions just to consider. How do you acknowledge and celebrate the diverse identities and backgrounds of your students in your course materials and discussions? In which way can your course materials better reflect the diverse experiences of your students? How can you adjust your teaching methods to respond to your students' unique needs? So that might include being mindful of differences in communication and learning styles. And finally, how can you empower your students to use their knowledge and experiences to challenge inequities in their education and beyond? Next up, we've got the trauma-informed pedagogy, which acknowledges the impact that trauma, whether it's personal, generational, or systemic, can have on students' ability to learn. So, as I said before, we can't control how safe someone feels, but using a trauma-informed pedagogy can reinforce that students can be brave in what they share and how they interact with the class. So the 5 principles, as you see here, are safety, trustworthiness, and transparency, which might include clear communication and consistency in what we're sharing with our students, how we're grading, etc. Choice, giving students maybe multiple options in their learning process, maybe having flexible deadlines or allowing students to choose their own topic, things like that. Collaboration, so whether it be students collaborating with each other or maybe they're collaborating with us as the instructor. And then finally, empowerment, so validating your students' experiences and perspectives while giving them the tools and confidence to take ownership of their learning, recognizing their strengths and being growth focused. And you're going to see this all intertwined within some of the teaching practices that I'll be sharing. And then finally, we've got the liberatory consciousness framework. Some of you may have not have heard this, but this is actually something that was adopted by Rutgers School of Social Work in the fall of 2022 in order to guide anti-racism and oppression in all facets of our school. So for me, it really serves as the foundation for all of my teaching practices that I'm going to be outlining. And just a brief synopsis of the components or the core components of the liberatory consciousness framework. We've got awareness, analysis, action, and then accountability and allyship. Um, so for awareness, how might the dynamics of oppression and privilege in society, your classroom, and within yourself influence your students' learning experience? For analysis, how do these dynamics play out in the school as a whole or in your classroom as a whole? How might it impact your online classroom? For action, what intentional steps can I take to challenge oppressive systems and behaviors in my classroom? And then accountability and allyship, what changes do I need to make in order to be a better ally, both inside and outside of the classroom? All right, so now we're going to get into the teaching practices. And I've split these up into specific categories, including setting the tone, communication, moderation, feedback, community, and checking in. And I'm going to go through these one at a time. All right, so this is one of our lecturers. Her name is Jennifer Campbell, and she talks a little bit about the importance of setting the tone. She has her own definition of brave spaces as well, and I'm going to give you a link to my website a little bit later where you can view some of these extra videos that I'm not showing today. But let's hear from Jennifer about setting the tone.
My name is Jennifer Campbell. I am an LCSW and adjunct lecturer in the master's program at Rutgers. I create introductory videos that usually will speak to a disclaimer of, hey, we're going into sensitive subject area. Please be respectful. Please hold multiple kernels of truth at the same time with this. Call in versus call out. And I think there's more effort in the beginning that goes into making an online platform a safe space, but it's also continuous.
All right, and she says it's about respecting multiple kernels of truth at the same time, calling in versus calling out. I love that aspect, multiple kernels of truth at the same time. All right, so some of the components of setting the tone, first off with a welcome announcement or an email. I recommend that you send a welcome email at least a week before your course actually starts so that you can establish an early connection with your students. I think it's really important because they're already anticipating your class. They're getting excited. But this setting the tone is really important so that they can start to get, your vibe, the vibe of the other students, really understanding what the classroom atmosphere is going to be like. It really sets the foundation for all of these other things. So that welcome announcement, and I have an example here, where you can talk a little bit about yourself. Where did you come from? Why is this important to you? And some important information about what they can expect from your course, what they can expect from your communication style. So you can outline, if you email me, I'm going to make sure to respond to you within, 24 to 48 hours. If I don't respond back to you right away, please feel free to give me a gentle nudge, letting them know that you are welcoming of them and giving them your hours so that they know what to expect. That's going to make them feel safer. The next up is a liquid syllabus. This is probably new to a lot of people. I absolutely love this. I have an example behind here that I'm going to show you. And a liquid syllabus, before I show you, is basically an accessible website that people can get to before their course becomes available. I'm not sure if this is the same for everybody, but for the School of Social Work, our courses don't go live until the very first day of class. And I noticed that because students are really excited and they're anxious, they want to know in advance what to expect. And a PDF of your syllabus is absolutely wonderful to include in your welcome email, but even better is this liquid syllabus. It's something that they can go to on their computer. It's something that they can go to on their phone if they'd like, but it just outlines the components from your syllabus in a really accessible way. So I'm going to show you an example of mine, and this was created with Google Sites. So I teach a course called Clinical Social Work Practice 1. And these components are literally just drag and drop. You can, create blocks. It's very easy to create. I recorded a video. I put it on YouTube. YouTube makes it really easy for closed captioning. And I just make my YouTube video unlisted so that I don't have random people watching my welcome video. But it tells tells them what my pronouns are, what they can call me. I'm fine with students calling me by my first name. It gives an outline of how the course works. So it tells them how long it's going to be, what days their assignments are typically due, their textbooks. I even forewarn them when I usually am grading, so that they know what to expect, when they can expect some feedback from me. I give them some tips so that they can stay updated on their assignments. I tell them how I prefer to be contacted. I like being contacted through my email instead of Canvas. And if they want to schedule time with me, they can do so via a link over here. And then I have a learning pact, and I invite them to add any additional things for our learning pact, things that they can expect from me, things that I can expect from them. I have important links. And then if we go to our grading policies, it talks about, the standard things that are located in the syllabus. I talk about my late policy. I talk about diversity and inclusion, academic integrity. And then if they need support, we have some information about our librarian. I've got some great resources for helping them with APA 7. If they need help getting in touch with ODS, we've got that there. And so all of the things that they might need are here. And as I said, they have access to this before the course starts. And it's very, very easy to create. So that's created in Google Sites. I'm just going to type here right now, sites.google.com. And anybody with a Gmail account can create that. Yeah, it's very easy, no problem. So next up, I also like to use what's called a Who's in Class survey. This is actually something that came to my attention by Tracy Addy from TIP. She's wonderful. So I adapted her Who's in Class survey so that students can share information with me in an anonymous way. And then I get an overall feeling of who is in my course. So this is sort of what that looks like. This is a PDF version, but really how you would send this to your students is either through a Qualtrics survey or through, Google Forms, something like that, where they can share their information privately. This should be something that is anonymous, and you're going to compile all the data. You're not looking at specific people, but in general, who is in your class, and you can sort of figure out how you might edit your teaching or change your teaching based on the people who are actually in front of you, right? So you might have students in multiple time zones. That might make you say, okay, you know what? I actually want to create a survey for my students in terms of how I make my groups. I want all of my West Coasters to be in groups together. I want all of my East Coasters to be in a group together. That way it's a little easier for them to collaborate with each other. Something like this might prompt you to start a poll so that you can do that for them. So these are just really helpful things. And I'm, like I said, I'm going to give you a link to my website later where you can find these and use them for yourself, but you feel free to use that. All right. And then humanizing your syllabus. Some of that I had done in my liquid syllabus, but essentially it's just using accessible language, inclusive policies, and a student-centered tone. So you want to try to avoid, unnecessary jargon and just really get down to the gist of what you're trying to say so that everybody understands, what is expected of them. There's no guesswork there. And then I think it's really important to co-create course expectations. You don't necessarily have to do this in every single course, but I think in particular, if you know that you're teaching a course that tends to deal with sensitive subject matters and you want to make sure that people are abiding by certain group rules, then you can do this by creating an editable Google slide deck, Google Doc. You can make a discussion thread, an announcement where people just comment some suggested, some suggested things, but basically including your students in creating these rules rather than just projecting it onto them and saying, these are the rules and that's it. It just makes people feel a lot more included. So I'm going to show you just an example of that as well. So I would suggest, if you're starting a discussion thread, for example, posting some inspirational, some inspiration so that they can kind of know what types of rules you're going for. So I have a sheet that you might use, such as using I statements instead of saying, accusing people, saying you, calling in versus calling out. Um, if harm happens, we want to repair that harm. We don't want to punish people. We don't want to make them feel worse. We want them to learn from that, right? Respecting other people's boundaries, engaging in dialogue, not debate. So these are just good to have when you're starting the conversation of co-creating those expectations and those rules, so that people sort of know the gist of what type of goals you're looking for. All right, next up, we've got communication. So first up, as I said earlier, we want to be consistent and clear. People feel safer when they know what to expect. So whether it be, like I said earlier, I forewarn them, I tend to grade on a Thursday. So I stick to that schedule and they know when to expect it. Consistent in our grading too, making sure that our expectations are clear. I like to use rubrics so that students know exactly what I'm going to be grading them on. Again, avoiding unnecessary jargon goes here too with the communication. I said earlier, communicating my response time. So I tell students that I reply to emails within 24 hours on weekdays and 48 hours on weekends and holidays, so that they're like, okay, I haven't heard back from Christine yet, but I know I'm going to within this time frame. And as I said before, I ensure that students feel comfortable to contact me and say, hey, I haven't heard back from you yet, because it's very possible that I missed something in my inbox. I don't want them to feel like I'm going to get upset if they remind me of something. I appreciate that. Be thoughtful and professional when reaching out to your students. Acknowledge previous information shared to remind them that you care and that their work is seen and valued. So for example, I have a student who I know her practicum placement is within a domestic violence shelter. So if I notice that an assignment in particular has to do with trauma or IPV, I'll call back and say, oh, this is something that would be really good for your practicum placement. And she knows, like, I remember her. I know that she's a real person, and I think of her. I think of how this material applies to her. Or if someone has shared something personal in their student introduction video. One thing I do is if someone mentions like a pet, a dog or a cat, I say, please send me a picture of your dog or your cat. And I might call back to that, like, how's Buddy doing? I hope you're giving him lots of treats. Little things like that really make your students feel like you're paying attention and you care about them. I also use multiple communication formats so that I can increase accessibility and engagement. I throw some GIFs in there, as you see from the beginning of our time together here. I'm a big fan of GIFs, so I include those sometimes in my announcements. I include pictures or emojis. I also use feedback in multiple formats as well. So I'm not just writing my feedback. Sometimes I might do an audio recording, especially with more sensitive things, so that they can hear the tone of my voice instead of sort of projecting what they think I might sound like. And it just helps you to be more relatable, and it showcases your personality. Once again, calling back to that COI framework, where we're showing that we are real people, right? And these are the ways that we can show that we're real people. Some student feedback in terms of this sort of subject matter. Being an online student can feel very lonely. I miss being in class in person, but I only have time for online classes. I feel much more connected when my professors reach out regularly. I also really like it when I can tell that they know who I am and that I'm not just a random name on a screen. So all of those things that I shared in that previous slide just help our students to know that we care about them, that they are definitely not a random name on a screen. All right, and next up, I think this is the biggest part that I find very helpful in my research and the experts that I've spoken to, is the moderation aspect. The moderation aspect, in particular, when we're dealing with those sensitive discussions, I think that these techniques have really helped me. So co-create expectations, those co-created expectations. We can remind our students of these, particularly if we're introducing one of those sensitive topics. We can do a quick reminder, hey, let's look back at our expectations when we are contributing to this discussion thread. Let's make sure it's aligning with that. We can also, depending on your profession, for social workers, we have the NASW Code of Ethics. So we can also guide students towards that code of ethics, reminding students that that's our foundational guide for respectful and professional engagement. Maybe you have a student code of conduct, something like that, but just pointing out to students that there are, specific guidelines on how we want to communicate with each other. We want to actively moderate our discussion threads and our discussion boards so that we can ensure that there is respectful engagement. And if we notice any microaggressions or insensitive comments, we want to address them directly, but also constructively, right? So you want to call in versus call out so that we can guide our students towards that deeper understanding without just completely shutting down. And we want to follow up on any challenging conversations privately when needed to offer additional support. So that might look like we are actually talking to that one student, maybe we're talking to a group of students. If we feel that we, as the instructor, are somehow included in this, we might want to bring in a third party to sort of moderate that discussion one-on-one as well. And another great technique that I actually learned from Jennifer, the lecturer before, is that when peers address harmful comments themselves before we are able to moderate, we want to acknowledge the strengths of that discussion and encourage positive engagement. So sometimes we're not able to we're not able to sort of help the dialogue while it's actually happening. We're seeing it afterwards, but sometimes our students are doing a really great job of calling in their peers. So we want to highlight the positives of that conversation, really showcase that our students did a great job of navigating that complex topic and being respectful of each other in the process. And we also want to use loving corrections, and I'll talk about that right after the next video, but that's something by Adrienne Marie Brown. So I'm just going to play this video, and then we'll get more into moderation.
I'm Caroline Harmondaro. I'm an assistant professor here at Rutgers School of Social Work. I'm a longtime community mediator. I've been doing that for about 27 years. Community-based mediation uses a lot of restorative justice principles as well as offers restorative justice services in most mediation centers. I feel that conflict resolution and dispute resolution interventions like mediation should be applied to conflicts. Restorative practices and restorative justice should be applied to a specific harm that's been done. If people are in an ongoing conflict and they're brought into a process that regards them as a victim and an offender, there's going to already be a built-in kind of one-sided judgment to the process. Whereas a dispute resolution process will arrive neutral and see two participants in a conflict. That can be a really important distinction if you've been part of an ongoing conflict where there's been harm on both sides. Restorative justice mindset would say there's been a harm here. There needs to be accountability and repair. The teacher, having seen the harm, would be holding the student accountable, but having them work it out face-to-face when possible. Dispute resolution approach would say there's an ongoing conflict and neutrally facilitate the two of them coming up with solutions. The teacher needs to use judgment as to which approach is correct. If there's one clear harm doer, or if there's an ongoing back and forth conflict. The idea of restorative practices is to give opportunities for repairing the harm rather than punishment.
All right, so Dr. Caroline Harmondaro, she is a complete expert in that. She's taught me a lot about restorative justice, about dispute resolution and conflict resolution, and I find that her techniques are really, really helpful, and they just need to be adapted a little bit in an asynchronous online learning environment, right? But going back to the loving corrections by Adrienne Marie Brown, it's the idea that correction should provide safety, not fear, and we can frame harm as a learning moment and not a disciplinary action. So we're not trying to punish people for being on the path towards learning and not knowing yet. We want to give students the space to reflect, to reframe, and to repair their comments. I think that repair is very important. One of the things that Dr. Caroline Harmondaro has shared with me is that, a lot of people who are victims, who are survivors, they don't get joy out of, typically they don't get joy out of seeing someone punished, right? They just want to be on the same page and to repair something, to see that other person take accountability and to learn. That is the majority of the mindset there. So some restorative questions for addressing harm might look like, would you mind clarifying what you meant by this comment? How do you think that this might impact others? What might be another way to express your perspective? And also a reminder that pause and reflect is a really great tool. So let's take a step back. How can we move forward with understanding, right? To help our students to see another perspective. All right, so now we're going to our next section, which is the feedback aspect. I believe in using a strengths-based feedback or what's called the wise, warm feedback method to highlight what students did well, along with pointing out any areas for improvement, and using unconditional positive regard when approaching the student's work. So wise, warm feedback is still having high standards for their work, to recognize their effort and ability and also guide them towards a specific action, right? So just an example of this chart, maybe a fixed mindset would say, good effort, but this needs more work. To make that feedback better with that high standards, effort, ability, and specific action, your assessment is thorough. One way to approve is by strengthening your justification for this intervention. Consider adding research or policy connections. And obviously you would want to adapt how you're saying this in your own personal tone, making it sound like you and not robotic. You can add emojis if you'd like, but just having all those components is really helpful in guiding your students to what you're looking for from them. Once again, with consistency, maintain a consistent grading schedule so students know when to expect your feedback. Offer that feedback in multiple formats like written, audio, or video. I like to mix it up. So one week I might do written on one topic, another time I might do audio, another time I might do video. Sometimes I'll do a whole few paragraphs for individual feedback for each student. Sometimes I'll do shorter feedback and pair that with a public response on the discussion thread if I want to make sure that everybody really understands something and I'm noticing that everybody is having the same thing sort of stick out as needing a little bit more depth. Focusing on growth over time. So this pairs with, you're remembering these students. They're not just a name on a screen. You're also remembering the previous work that's been submitted, and you're showcasing how they've grown, and really pointing out, wow, this is great. You followed my instructions the last time. I think that it's okay to allow revision and resubmission when possible. The purpose is learning, right? And when someone is able to revise and resubmit, it's showcasing that they are growing from what they previously did. As we said before, rubrics, I think, are so important to guide that student towards what is exactly expected. There's no guesswork there when you're using rubrics. And I think it's important, like I said earlier, to personalize your feedback for each student so that they know that you read their work. I can't emphasize this enough. Although our students are in asynchronous classes, they talk to each other, they compare. So if you're copying and pasting the same feedback to every student, they're going to start noticing that, and that's going to make them feel like they're not important, right? And ask questions. I think this is such a great tool. Your students may not ever answer your questions in your feedback, but you're still posing a question for them to dig deeper and to start thinking a little deeper in what they're submitting. And those questions can also come within the discussion thread as well, where you're asking questions so that students can connect with each other. And speaking of connecting with each other, community is another very, very very important facet of an online program, since it can feel very isolating for our students when they don't get to see each other in real time. So as I mentioned earlier, for those of you who may not have been here yet, we had a self-affirming icebreaker, but just another example of what that self-affirming icebreaker might look like. And just to remind you while I get to that next screen, it's icebreakers that encourage student strengths, values, and experiences. So you can choose a prompt, like share a favorite photo and explain why you chose that. Take a photo of an object that holds deep meaning for you and tell us why. Or post an image that represents your identity and write a haiku about yourself. I like to use Padlet, for example, for these. And then students can also comment on the Padlets. They can, give it likes and stars and all of that. They can use GIFs if they want, pictures, videos, it doesn't matter. But I think this is a great way for students to introduce themselves a little bit differently than they're used to. And they're also looking inward for their strengths. And they're also sharing parts of their identity. You can also just do this within a discussion thread in Canvas or another LMS. You can use Google Slides as well, or VoiceThread. And then in order to encourage interaction, you can ask a separate question. So what similarities do you notice between your experience and your peers? How does this object or photo inspire you or relate to your journey? So it's just helping them not only share about themselves, but also make connections with others in a guided way. For the School of Social Work, we have student lounges, and I noticed that our students don't typically take advantage of this. So reminding them, if you do have a student lounge, that students can take advantage of this. If they use GroupMe, they can share their link for their GroupMe in their student lounge. They can correspond with each other, ask questions, intermingle, but remind them that this is an aspect that they can utilize. Highlight connections between students within the discussion threads too. Say, oh, you're working in this practicum agency, you're working in substance use field. I actually noticed that, Brenda also works in substance use, and she also lives in California. I wonder if you guys are near each other, so helping them along the way as well. And doing student spotlights is also a great thing, where you can focus on something that a student said in their discussion thread through an announcement, just to recognize their efforts, their insights, their thoughtful discussion posts, or even some fun facts about them. And finally, the wisdom wall. I'm going to show you an example of that. But essentially, that is where students can post key takeaways, any insights, or real-world applications of the course materials. So this is a great example. I'm just going to play a little bit of it, where students are sort of passing along any wisdom that they have for the next group of students, so that they know what to expect, so they can be comforted that in terms of the class that they're about to take.
How was I feeling at the start of this class? Well, when I read the syllabus, I was like very overwhelmed. I was like, oh my God, I'm a full-time student. I got other stuff to do. I got kids to take care of. I got sports to do. I was like, really, do I really want to take this class? Because it really was an extra elective for me. I had already took my elective for the certificate for photography, but my photography teacher recommended the class as an elective. And I had tried to get in the class last semester and I wasn't able to. But I am so glad that I took this class, because I'm not one to, I hate history, any kind of history. And I really enjoyed this class. I learned so much about photography. I learned so much about working on the internet, blogging. It is a great learning experience. You will not regret it. Yes, it's a lot of work, but you take a lot from the course. I have taken many online classes, but this is the best one I've ever taken, where I wanted to interact, where I enjoyed listening to all the other students and putting a face with the person. So good luck. Don't let the beginning of the course stop you, because at the end, it's very rewarding.
And this was done through VoiceThread. which is a really great tool. But I think just acknowledging that, kind of passing the information along, I think is really comforting to students, or pointing out some key aspects, key things that they've learned during the course. All right, so lastly, we have checking in. I think it's really important to provide optional synchronous Zoom sessions. That does not mean that you will have a lot of students show up. There are times where I've only had one student or two students show up, sometimes even none. But what I have found is that just the option and it being there makes students feel like they have more belonging in the course. You can utilize those optional Zoom sessions to prepare students for larger assignments, help them get prepared for quizzes or exams, or you can just use it as a way for them to network and create breakout rooms, whatever the case may be, or just as an introduction to yourself. What I tend to do is I'll set an hour up and I'll let my students know you can literally come in for 30 seconds just to say hi and leave. That is absolutely okay with me, but I want you to know that I'm here, right? Another thing that I think is important is reflections and engaging your students to be able to give you feedback, and feedback with each other that they can see in addition to those mid-course and end of semester evaluations. For those mid-course and end of semester evaluations, I think it's important to remind your students what the purpose of them is. They get a lot of them. They see the reminders, but I don't think that they always know why they have to do it or how that impacts them in the long run. So a reminder to them that those are anonymous, that you do not know who is submitting what, that the purpose is that you want your teaching to be better, that you want them to learn better, and also reminding them that they can submit information in terms of the actual course material itself, and that you take these into account and that they're helping future students as well with these course evaluations. And then an online student support coach. Our School of Social Work is very, very lucky. We have a wonderful student support coach, and I can't tell you how important this is for asynchronous programs. I'm going to go into that in just a second. First, I'm just going to show you some reflective prompts that we can use. So some opening reflections: what brought you to social work? What are your learning goals? And then you can close it out. What advice would you give to future students? And you can use that voice thread also for the end of course reflection. How will you continue to engage with this topic once you're finished with that course? And once again, you can use Padlet, Google Slides, just a regular discussion thread, it doesn't matter, but just prompting them to really reflect on what they're learning throughout the course is very important. Oh, and then, sorry, I thought that I had it open. Just give me 1 second. And I'm going to share with you some information about our student support coaching. So this is something I can share with you as well in case you want to advocate for a student support coach in your department. But student support coaches provide guidance. They're helping the students navigate the full program, making them to feel less alone. They're personalized support. So they provide encouragement and check-ins tailored to each student's need. They connect them to resources, whether it be ODS, whether it be student affairs, or anything offered by the university. Maybe it's UWill or a mental health component. They give them guidance on time management. They are a liaison and motivation. One of my favorite things that our student support coach, Lisa, always shares is like, I am going to get you across that stage if I have to drag you. But she really cares, right? And that's just another person in the corner of our students, showing them that they can do this. And that's really so great. All right, so hold on 1 second. Just going to go back to the end real quick. I apologize. All right, so going back to the reflective prompts, I want to prompt you now. I want to ask you, how are you going to continue to engage with this topic once you're finished with today? Whether it be this particular creating brave spaces in asynchronous learning, whether it be a previous presentation that you saw, or just in general, what are you going to take away from this online learning conference? how are you going to continue to engage with this topic? And you can feel free to utilize the chat for that. You can also feel free to utilize the chat if you have any questions for me. If you would like to have me go back to any section of my presentation to show you something else, I would be happy to share with you. And I see Amanda asks in the chat about optional Zoom sessions. How do you encourage them to use it more? That's a great question. So one thing that I would try to find out is their schedule, so that who's in class survey might guide us a little bit more to know that maybe we have a huge classroom of students who are managing multiple responsibilities. Maybe we have a lot of students in the class who are in a different time zone and we're not setting it up at a time that they can actually attend. Maybe we have some students who feel really confident in the course material. Whatever the case may be, we can sort of figure out how to change the Zoom session to suit their actual needs. We can also, I'm trying to look for the word. We can try to get them to come by making it worth their while. So maybe you're going to do a quiz time, like something fun, right? Or maybe, you know, I've seen like instructors within their actual course put Easter eggs to entice students to look at parts of the course that they wouldn't typically look at, but that they really need to look at. So saying like, if you find all these Easter eggs, maybe one of the Easter eggs is in your optional Zoom session, then I'm going to send candy to you, or I'm going to send you something funny, or, you know, a supplemental thing that you're going to enjoy. So just really making it worth their while, I think, is something great. Yes, it is. All right, so I'm going to share the link to my Wix site. No problem. And this Wix site has all of the materials that I just went over and some added ones as well. You can feel free to get in touch with me via email if you have any further questions. But everything that I've gone over, all of those PDFs, those are all located on this website. And then you've got some added videos that I think will also be really helpful for all of you. Thank you, everybody.